gentlemen, family and friends, just in case, Your Royal Highness, thought I'd spotted a corgi on the way in there somewhere. Welcome to you all, and thank you for coming today. I know some of you come from fairly distant sort of parts all over the country. West Country, Weston-super-Mare, London, Manchester, Sheffield. I think somebody from Trimdon Station even. I heard a bit of a rumour that somebody had actually opened a book for bets on how long my speech was going to be. Well, I don't think I'm going to give too much away if I say, well, my money's on 1 hour 40 minutes. So hope you're feeling warm. Actually, it won't last long because of a throat problem. Sue said if I spoke too long, she'd cut it. Don't laugh, just throw money. Today, our two families have got a common bond in the sort of marriage of Paula and Richard. We're delighted, Sue and I, to welcome Richard to our family, smashing guy, and be sharing the day with Alan and Mark and all the family. And thank you very much for coming. I'd also like to thank, I know Richard has, everybody who's sort of been involved in the organisation, and there's been a lot of people, particularly Claire and Alan, Claire and Ian, Jossie with the music, Lisa with the flowers, Gillian and Charm with the hair, and Gillian's done the cake as well. To everybody who's sort of helped, it's been tremendous effort, as I'm sure Richard will agree. Also, Val and Sue and Mary, Sue's nan, who spent many a happy evenings at our house making some of the bunting and this kind of thing, which all went really well until the port and lemon ran out. And then we started knocking over drinks, you know, so we had to call a halt there, as it were. Richard's again already thanked the bridesmaids, and they look gorgeous, don't they? I know these days at my age you have to be careful what you say about them. I end up joining Stuart Hall and Rolf Harris and things like that. But they do look gorgeous, don't they? And yes, terrific sort of couple of hen parties they organised. I know Paula's sort of really enjoyed it. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much. It's been quite a sort of a week at our house, all sorts of things happening in the evenings. Seems to be party on every night just about, with various bits of preparations. Our green recycling box is already full of sort of Prosecco and sort of champagne bottles and this kind of thing. But this morning was quite an eye-opener with all the sort of makeup and the hair being done, seemed to take forever. Terms like primer and layering and foundations all being used. I mean, I've not heard those terms since the last time I went to B&Q, you know. But for Sue and I, today brings back a lot of happy memories of our life with Paula. Our beautiful daughter Paula, there's actually only one L in beautiful Paula. So today is like the first time in 30 years I've got a word in X-rays, which is really good. I was there at a birth. Over to you, Richard. I was there at a birth, as I think Susan was as well. And I'm sure Paula was bored, sort of laughing and chatting, because that's the way she sort of is. She's always full of fun. I remember the nurse said she looked a lot like me, and I'm really proud that they turned her the right way up. You know. Being the firstborn, she always was our favourite. I mean, that was until 2 years later, of course, Chris came along. So only joking there, or am I? We think of Paula as a bright young lady, and so she is. I mean, she's got incredible sort of qualifications in the equestrian sort of arts, and of course recently retrained as a maths teacher, and is doing very well on that. But when she was sort of younger, we weren't quite so sure. When she was a little toddler, she sort of seemed to develop her own phonetic language. So our Christopher was Ikick, a friend William, Carol's son, was Bim Bim, and Mother and Toddlers was Muk Muk Toddies, you know. So we were advised to actually take her to a speech therapist, which we did, and Paula attended several sessions at the speech therapist. You can imagine Sue and I's delight when we went to collect her from one of the sessions, and Paula came out and said, "The speech therapist says I don't have to go anymore, you know, problem solved there then, eh?" Paula's always had a love of animals, something I think she got from her Auntie Mary. Paula's Christmas list always used to start off with animals. Then we had a dog, then she wanted a cat. rabbit, then a hamster, and then a mouse, and eventually we got down to things like midges and dust mites and this kind of thing. But as far as we got when she was young was rabbits. We had a little group of rabbits there. One of her favourite was Miffy, and I can remember taking her to Sedgefield Show one time with this little pet rabbit, and there were all these super bred rabbits, you know, that probably cost a fortune, and little Miffy was sat there sort of scratching himself, you know, this sort of thing. She was powerful. I remember the judge sort of took one look at little Miffy and she nearly swallowed a false teacher. It's obviously a very loved pet, you know, and I think Miffy won first prize for the best loved pet there. It wasn't quite the smartest, as it were. And Miffy was a very loved pet, along with Pewter and Pepper, two other rabbits. A little trio ravaged our garden for years, you know, and we never had any sort of flowers. Her other big love, of course, was horses. I mean, she's had riding lessons, had been working around stables ever since the day she could walk, as it were. And over the years, watching her, you know, given Sue and I a lot of pleasure, and be very proud of, again, how she sort of performed. We've never ceased to be amazed about her enthusiasm for that kind of sort of work, which often is, you know, quite difficult and obviously quite dangerous. It has been quite stressful as well. Horses are big, sort of dangerous animals, as Richard, I'm sure, will confirm these days. But I remember as a small child, we took her up to a field near where we lived and to feed some horses, and she put a little piece of carrot on her hand and sort of held her hand out, and this horse opened his mouth and her hand disappeared from this horse's mouth. Sue and I shrieked with horror, "Oh my God!" You know, and she just took her hand out and said, "See, Daddy, Mummy, the carrot's gone." Laughed and that, you know. Of course, we were regular visitors to that field for many years after that, as it were. A number of summers we used to get a lease horse from one of the local stables, and one of them was one of my favourites, was a horse called Copper, which was I think one of the slowest thing on four legs since the wooden horse of Troy, you know. She loved Copper. He was a fabulous little horse, and we took him to an event at the farm just above Tesco's these days, and Copper sort of plodded around and all of a sudden decided to shoot up this field with sort of Paula gripping tightly with her knees, holding onto his mane, and Sue and I run up the field shouting, "Stop, stop!" He did, and you know, Paula just laughed it off, and I think that's Paula. She sort of, you know, finds fun in everything, sort of thing. Never really worried, as it were.
You don't say.
We took her to a gymkhana at Sedgefield Show one time. Again, one of the lease horses, and I'll swear she actually fell off more times. She actually jumps, you know. Every time she hit the deck, Sue and I went, "Oh my God, no!" You know, as if every bone in her body's gone there, you know. And she just jumped up again, got on him, and did the jump, you know, and eventually got round. Again, you know, Paula, you know, she's got a lot of sort of fighting spirit, never gives up, as it were. Absolutely fabulous in that respect. Swimming was one of her sort of pursuits when she was younger. She swam, I think, for her school, very good. The Girl Guides, Brownies, Stockton Swimming Club, I think, with Louisa and Amy, I think, were down there. And Sue and I, again, were very proud. We used to go and watch her, and she was very good, particularly things like the crawl. I've never seen anything surpass through the water there. But Wales was quite so proud. There was one time, I think it might have been at a Stockton event, and I'm not sure whether Louisa and Amy are actually swimming in that event. I've got a feeling they might have been. But Paul has sort of stood on the starting blocks there, and the starting marshal's going through his routine. On your marks, get set. Before he could finish the sort of sequence, Paul has sort of overbalanced, fell into the water, and there was a very audible, loud shout of, "Oh shit!" as she hit the water. Not exactly a gold medal evening, that evening. After school, it was university, and off she went to the West Country, where she met Amanda and Holly, who are here today, and good to see them. They've remained friends ever since, which is tremendous. Remember, Sue and I took her down to Gloucester, and we went to the Hall of Residence. She was going to be in her first year. Took her into a little room. This little room had a small ensuite, fabulous, you know, sink and this sort of thing. But Sue and I can remember Paula sort of walked into this little room and stood there and said, almost in tears, "Mummy, I don't know how to clean a toilet." I suspect, Richard, she still does.
That's a blue job now.
Yeah. One for the future, perhaps. Bit of training there. Yeah. We took her down to Gloucester to W.H. Smith's to get some stationery and this kind of thing. She burst into tears in the middle of the shop, and we chatted around, and she was fine. She's not sort of like that for long. I remember we got back to the Hall of Residence, and we're walking down through the hall of residence, and we looked through a window and there was a young girl sat on the edge of a bed crying her eyes out, and Paul just walked past. Oh, what a baby, you know. So, yeah, that's our Paula. She's not down for long, as it were. By the time we got up to her room, we'd gone via the kitchen to show the facilities in there. Interesting, something else. And by the time we'd done all that, she'd met another female student, and they arranged to meet in the bar an hour later, and after that she couldn't wait to get rid of us, kind of thing. So yeah, she's never down for long, our Paula. A couple of summers working at Camp America. She went to Australia for the year, came back and did what she'd always wanted to do, bought her own horse. Met Richard, of course, and suddenly I'm down to fourth in line in Paula's favourite males. Richard, Christopher, Connor, and you know, there I am. Makes a change from when she had the rabbits and I was fourth in line behind 3 rabbits. Even worse one year, she had gerbils and they bred. I wasn't even in the top 10, you know. Yeah, incredible. We're delighted that Paula and Richard have got together. They're well matched, they're both very focused on their respective activities, but they share a lot, particularly in the sporting area, running, skiing, cycling, that kind of thing. I know since Paula met Richard, her running's come on a treat since he started coaching her. I know Richard developed a love and a knowledge of horses. He's a valuable member of Team Connor these days. You can hardly have a conversation with Richard these days without he's not mentioning fetlocks and girth straps, withers and this kind of thing. You know, it's an example of his new sort of found love of horses. He was asked recently to pop down to Southmore Farm just to check on Connor, who was in a field with a number of other horses. Paula was unavailable, and lo and behold, you know, Richard came back and reported back, and Paula later on said, "So how was Connor then?" He said, "Well, I don't know, but the brown horses looked okay." The kind of phrase that typifies horse lovers everywhere. I think at that point I might have briefly gone up to third in Paula's list. Probably only briefly, yeah. To us, Paula seems to sort of live in a world of sort of frantic but semi-organised chaos. But it works for her. She's an action person like Richard. On a recent school trip aboard skiing, I think before she left for the airport at lunchtime, she managed to fit in the 5k park run at Hardwick Park and 2 visits to Connor. Richard, well, he played football on a Sunday morning for St Edmunds, one of the best local sides in the area, or used to be when Richard played for them. His idea of relaxation then in the afternoon was go for a 90-mile bike ride, you know, and then if he was still feeling rusty, a bit of a run round Hardwick Park in the evening. And so they're both action people. You know, they love that sort of thing. Domestic goddess she may not be. I mean, you can always tell when Paula's cooking because you can hear the fire extinguisher going in the kitchen. I think you'll find her mashed potato brings a lump to your throat. But she's a fun person. She's great to have around. I don't think life will ever be dull with Paula around. Something marriage might sort of hold you back. But Paula and Richard, they seem to have flourished, I think, since they got together. I know the last few months have been difficult, but I think it's probably, you know, strengthened the sort of relationship, as we said earlier. And there's light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there? As Richard said recently, you know, when you go through something like this, it puts a lot of other things in perspective, doesn't it? And I think that will sort of help them. Their glasses are always half full, in fact, often totally full. In that respect, if I can ask you all just to join me in a toast to Paula and Richard.
To Paula and Richard.
Thank you.
Cheers, Bob.
Cheers, Richard. Cheers, Megan.
Oh.